Okay, this is our last reading, our last session of the Silver Trumpet by Owen Barfield, and we are on chapter 15, I believe. Oh no, that's not 15. Sorry. It's probably 14. Yeah, it's 14. So I'm going to start. Meanwhile, Princess Lily's messenger had started off on horseback to find Miss Thompson, and it was not very long before he reached B Cottage, Tittinghanger Lane. He gave Miss Thompson his mistress's message and asked her if she had any answer that he might take back with him. Yes, said Miss Thompson. Tell your mistress that Miss T always helps those who have the courage to ask her. I will come. So the messenger went posting back with his answer, and 100 yards from the castle gate narrowly escaped crushing with his horse's hoofs a toad which was lolloping wearily along the road in the other direction. For that was as far as poor Prince Piria had managed to get in all this time. You see, he found it so difficult to get along with a letter in his mouth that it stopped him from taking breath easily. As soon as the messenger had left her, Miss Thompson put on her sugarloaf hat, and her little old cloak, took her stick, and started out on foot for the castle. It was not very far, and soon she perceived coming toward her a great gray-green toad. How surprised she was when she saw that it had a letter in its mouth, and how much more surprised when she stooped down and saw that the letter was addressed to herself. At first the toad would not let go, but she spoke to it and said that she was Miss Thompson, and then the toad let go. It let go of the letter and waited while she read it. And when she had read what the little cook at the inn had written in the letter, Miss Thompson bent her peaky nose right down to the toad's ear and began whispering in it. I'm sorry, she said, that I cannot turn you back again into a prince. There's only one way of doing that. And that is if somebody loves you and cherishes you as you are now, in the shape of a toad. Alas, thought Piria to himself, who will do that to a hideous, icy creature like me? Must I spend the rest of my life like this? Miss Thompson read his thought and answered it. She spoke to him for a quarter of an hour, telling him exactly what he must do, and he listened and laid well to his heart all her counsel. Then, as she went on her way, he lolloped off the road into a ditch and rested there, for there was no longer any need for him to go to her cottage. When Miss Thompson arrived at the tower, Princess Lily had almost forgotten why she had sent for her, but the sound of the silver trumpet was no longer in her ears. Therefore, she had grown languid again, and she began talking to Miss Thompson as though she were one of the royal physicians, complaining of headaches and sleeplessness, and moaning peevishly of the wretchedness of her lot. But all Miss Thompson said was, What do you want? Oh, I'm so miserable, such a wretched, useless creature. Well, then, what are you afraid of? How do you know I'm afraid of anything? You must be afraid of something if you are a miserable, wretched, and useless creature. What are you afraid of? Nothing. That is, I am afraid of. I don't like. That is, I hate the idea of. She could not mention the word. Of what? Said Miss Thompson sharply. Of toads, answered Princess Lily, and began crying softly. Miss Thompson's voice grew kinder. And why, she said, why, pray, should you hate one of God's creatures more than another, huh? Princess Lily had no answer. And now she remembered what her father had said to her all those years ago on their way home from their walk in the afternoon, before she had told Gamboy about the toad. Only weak and silly people scream when they see mice and spiders and toads, he had said. You must get to know them, and you mustn't be frightened. I don't know, she answered humbly. I'll try not to. That's right, said Miss Thompson. You must get to know them. And shutting yourself up in this tower all day is hardly the best way about it, is it? No, no, said Lily through her tears. I suppose you think that being afraid of a thing is a reason for running away from it. Well, said Lily doubtfully, it does seem to be rather a good reason. At that, Miss Thompson paused and looked thoughtful, and then she smiled good-humoredly. Uh, and then she grew serious again and said slowly, "Yeah, but as a matter of fact, it isn't. I can't tell you why. You'll have to take that from me." And then she said, "Do you want to be like the princesses in the books your father used to read to you?" Princess Lily did not answer. For after Miss Thompson said that, far away, deep down in her memory, she heard her father's voice reading aloud to her the stories of Alcestis and of the brave Imogen. She thought of all those happy evenings when she was a little girl, and when he had read to her, and when she had danced to him in the light of the hanging lamp. But then she thought of her father as he was now, growing old, alone in his study, and of herself shut up alone in her dismal tower. How long was it since she had heard his voice, or even since she had danced a step? All this she thought of, but she did not answer Miss Thompson. Silence gives consent, said that lady at last. Then she leaned forward and, talking for a quarter of an hour in a low, earnest voice, told Princess Lily what she must do if she wished to make herself once more into a real princess. After that, Miss Thompson departed, and as on her way home she passed the ditch where that toad was resting itself. She called out to him, "Tonight," and passed on without waiting for an answer. That night, for the first time in 8 years, Princess Lily slept alone, for she had resolved to do everything that Miss Thompson had told her to do. She was frightened of being alone after dark. Therefore, as soon as it grew dark, she called all her maids in waiting round her, and all the men servants whose duty was to guard the tower, and told them to go away and sleep in the castle. She was dreadfully frightened of sleeping in a dark room, and every night for 8 years had been a little nightlight, had a little nightlight burning in her chamber, so that she could see the walls. Therefore, tonight, before she went to bed, she put out that nightlight. And oh, she was dreadfully, dreadfully frightened of opening her little window, for the creepers grew up to it from the ground, and she feared she dared not say to herself what she feared. Therefore, tonight she opened that little window as wide as it would go, and lay in her bed, looking at the star that peeped in through it. Sleep? She couldn't even stop herself trembling. The darkness seemed like a black, stuffy bag which someone had dropped noiselessly over her head. Over and over again she moved as though to get up and light the light. And if there had been anyone below in the tower, she would have called out for companionship. But then she would say to herself, "Hold on tight, Lily. Hold on tight. Be a princess." And with that, she would clench her fingers hard upon her thumbs, or grasp a handful of bedclothes and cling tight to them to keep the fear away. And then the fear grew almost too great to bear. And when the fear grew almost too great to bear, the creepers rustled in the wind, and the moaning wind flapped the curtains against the walls of the dark chamber, and the floorboards creaked as though someone were tiptoeing upstairs to her. She would give one great lonely sob and say to herself, "They can't do worse than kill me." And then I can only die once. And again, death is better for me than another 8 years like the last. Nevertheless, her heart stood still as she heard something drop down from the windowsill onto the floor of her room, for she knew without seeing it that it was a toad. But then in the darkness, Prince Pirio heard the loud thumping of her heart. A great pity, when in the darkness Prince Pirio heard the loud thumping of her heart, a great pity for her smote him, so that he yearned to cry aloud and to speak comfortably to her. But he could not, for he could not speak at all. Yet amid all her terror, Prince Lily knew what she must do. And when she had kissed the toad upon its icy head and cherished it, the moon, which had risen in the meantime behind a bank of clouds, stood forth suddenly and shone into the little room. And there was no longer any loathsome toad on her bed, but there in the middle of the chamber, his chain mail flashing silver in the moonlight, stood a beautiful young prince. And when she arose from her bed, he took her in his arms. Nor did Princess Lily ever know fear again, either in the darkness or in the daytime. Okay. Any thoughts on that so far?
Just lots of happiness.
Yes, yes, yes. But there's also kind of the idea that you kind of have to go through the thing that you fear the most, which is like, my goodness.
Yeah.
Uh, but it is the call. It's and what's interesting is that Miss Thompson, even though she in the beginning of the book she's called a witcher, witty or witchery sort of woman, something like this. It's really clear that she means good, means well, and means the best. And even though she kind of combines two parts to her in herself, one part uh, where she is like how would I say that? Like Gandalf. I mean, for example, he can be kind of hard at certain moments and really like kind of say what needs to be said to Bilbo, like to save him from this obsession with the ring. Uh, but at the other, the next moment he would like all warm up and speak so gently and kindly
Mhm.
and embrace him as well. So there's this like, a good combination. I don't know how to call this in her character of what? Like being gentle and firm at the same time. I don't know how to call
Yeah,
this.
yeah. So then you can trust her gentleness because you know that she's not just a wishy-washy person. She's got a backbone, but when she softens, it means something.
And just another passing thought I had. I wish there were more people like that in my life, because growing up, people tend to kind of fall on either side. They're either too lenient, so to say, too wishy-washy, to use this phrase, or they're too exacting, I'd say, too critical and just want to kind of, it tears you down. But, to have this combination, and like you said, Mary, it kind of makes you want to trust the person more
Yeah,
when you know that they're not doing it just all the time. That they're not
yeah,
like,
yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah. And it's a very touching combination, I think, because especially for some reason in a male person of authority, when they soften, like toward children or dogs or some authoritarian um alpha type person, when you see the soft spots, it's especially moving. Maybe like Gandalf, like you said.
yeah. Aragorn is another example. He can be all manly, all kind of,
Yeah,
very alpha, so to say. But in other moments, he's almost like unsure of himself, and that
yeah,
is really, really like a winning feature. that a lot of people don't possess.
Yeah, I know.
Well, go ahead. I was just going to add another thing that I really liked about her was she saw the possibility in the frog, and because the frog had a spell cast, or Prince Pirio had a spell cast upon him, and he was kind of suddenly loathsome and small and unimportant and ugly to everybody. And yet she stopped and paid attention to him, and then she saw the possibility of something really magical happening in him. And I think a lot of times when people have kind of these spells cast upon them, like everyone sees them as ugly and nobody likes them and they're not popular or they're not important, everybody ignores them. And yet some of those people are really like have these great treasures within themselves. And there's so much possibility for magic within that obscure, small little person, that you don't notice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, when we just first learned about him, it kind of, Owen Barfield kind of repeats it several times that he's gone. I mean, his long journey to Mountainy Castle, there were so many things he had to give up. He had to give up his socks, royal socks. He had to give up his this, his that. And he's gone through the whole journey, spiritually speaking. He's kind of he had to let go of so much of his kingly whatever, the
Right.
expectations of life. But, for in his estimation, Lily was worth it, and it kept him going.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that him being turned into a toad was like the last straw, but that, because of everything that he had gone through, he was able to go through this as well, even though he was, nearly desperate, I'd say at the
You're
moment.
right. Yeah. He had to give up all his royalty and his social status, like to the point of being a little frog before he was able to find, and that's what allowed him to find the princess in the end through the intervention of Mrs. Thomas.
Yeah.
I I like to think about, Princess Lily went through 8 years of agony and just being, torn apart by fear, but you get to kind of see in the background how things are working together to sort of deliver her from that. It's encouraging to think about when you're in a place where you're like, I can't pull myself out, but then,
Yeah.
you know, the prince comes along.
Mhm.
As a frog.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
frog. Your worst fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I had another call just yesterday, and it's interesting. We talked. One of the things we talked about is chaos. We were like, again, we're talking about AI. It seems to be like this topic is everywhere. But so I asked that person, what kind of puts you off when you look at that AI art, which is very kind of a sometimes fantasy. I mean, because you can't really. Imagine fantasy. I mean, people often ask AI, like, draw this fantasy world, and there are all kinds of pictures online of fantasy worlds. And this person said, it looks very flashy, very bright, but it also looks so uh, uh, exact, very, very accurate, mathematically accurate, that it puts you off. And then we started talking like that. Everything human stories, even like take my own journey. If I, in hindsight, if I look back and see how my journey in life has been, there's so much chaos.
Mm.
Meaning, what the way I behaved, the way others behaved, were so totally unpredictable, and that you don't find this perfect symmetry even in your own story. And anyway, we kind of flashed back to the Silmarillion, how the music of Iluvatar um, intentionally included chaos. That this evil guy, the Melkor, his name is, you kind of brought into the story. There's this chaos, But God, the Illuvatar says, no, we're not going to eliminate or kill or destroy this guy. Chaos will be woven into the whole, which is something that it's just like talking about, Prince Periel and this whole redemption story of Princess Lily. I mean, if you put all these factors together, they're like as chaotic and unpredictable and weird and strange to the, but you say something in you says, oh, okay, that's not strange. That's the way life is.
Yeah.
That's exactly, or like even Christ's resurrection. I mean, I really enjoy sometimes kind of before Christmas to go through some of those stories, not Christmas, I mean Easter, to what led up to resurrection. And like every single story is like, it's over. It's like it's nothing's gonna change in this. I mean, it's humanly impossible to make up any sense out of this total chaos. And then something changes. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, now though, it seems like we're headed into a chaotic period, unlike any in my lifetime, with everybody kind of inventing their own reality. And then they'll have the AI reality, and then even just all this madness around the unidentified flying objects and stuff. Everybody's got a different take on it. And I fear that we may not even know that it's not true or that it's true because of AI and the inability to trust our sources of information. I don't think we're there yet. I still have trusted podcasts I listen to, but I worry about 10 years from now. How are people going to know what's real, unless it's in their backyard? If it's coming through the news, seems like anybody could give you news, or the machine itself could give you news, and you wouldn't be able to tell. Because the few times I've used AI, like in research, I get such a coherent piece of writing, and it organizes the very thing I was feeling chaotic about in terms of trying to put a subject together. So I'm grateful for that. I mean, I go, wow, but I'm never thinking it's a person. I'm thinking it's an amalgamation of information that a machine is, pulled together. Um, anyway, it's an interesting time. And I wonder what Barfield would have thought of this time. It's
Yeah.
impossible, or Lewis or Tolkien. I don't think they could believe what's going on
And
in terms
everything
of
was,
technology.
yeah. And it's been happening so fast. When they were like, in their 20s, just cars were just barely emerging.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Well,
yeah.
I'm working on a book now about Thomas Edison, and so he was a child in 1850s, right, born right before the Civil War, and then he works on a train, and I'm pinpointing that era, and the covered wagons were going past the train. People were literally heading to California in wagons and horses. He died, I think, in 1932, around there. And by then, he was seeing cars. He had a lot to do with all of that. But you think, my mother lived when he died. So she would have known somebody who had seen the covered wagons going to the West, and she lived to see technology. I can't think of a more different reality than one from the other. It's just going so fast, it's hard to believe.
Yeah, and it is accelerating, I think. Accelerating. So, okay, so I think this is the last chapter. Um, it was not very long before the prince went away into the adjoining room to wait while Princess Lily dressed herself. I wonder, he thought to himself, how I come to be wearing this suit of chainmail. which I thought was at the other side of the world. He did not know that it was not his own chainmail at all, but a brand new suit, which old Miss Thompson herself had fashioned for him out of dreams and put upon him while the toad was walking, and he himself was only a dream. But it was. And then he returned to the princess, and all night long they sat together talking, until the moon sank down in the west, and the sun arose and looked in at the casement. And although she had never seen him before, Princess Lily knew that Prince Perio was her prince. She told him all about her life at the castle, of horrible dreams, and how unhappy she had been all those long years and years. But as she told him of it, the unhappiness seemed to vanish, even from her memory, so that now all seemed unreal. Her life in the tower, her sickly headaches, and her fears. And then, because that great weight had been pressing on her heart for so long, and was now lifted from it suddenly, suddenly she wept, so that if there were left in her any dregs of sorrow at all, the sweet tears washed them away. When she was herself once more, her first thought was for her father, and she told Prince Perio that if he could win King Courtesy back to be his old self again, he would indeed have made her the happiest princess in the world. Very carefully had the prince listened to all she told him of affairs at the castle, and especially at the end to her account of hearing the trumpet call. As he listened, he remembered also sundry things which the little cook at the inn had told him, for he too had spoken of a silver trumpet. Now he was a very wise young prince, wise in his school days and wise when he started out from home. And not for nothing either had he walked all alone around the world and even been turned into a toad at the end of it. Such adventures are very uncomfortable while they last, but they give a man understanding. So he knew what to do. First of all, he packed off a messenger to the inn to fetch the little cook, for he could not forget how much he owed to his letter of introduction. That was the first thing he did. And then he set out to find Aunt Gamboy. Aunt Gamboy was up in her privy chamber, addressing a large mass meeting of the amalgamated princesses. I shan't tell you what she was saying to them, for it was very much like what she had said before the citizens of Mountainy from her tub in the marketplace. Very much like it. And moreover, she was telling them all to go back to their countries in disguise, and there upon tubs in their different marketplaces to say what she had said, and to arouse rebellion and discontent among the citizens. But there was distress at that time in many of those countries. Gamboy was promising, if they would do this, to make them all queens in those countries. And they believed her. But she had no intention at all of doing any such thing. Oh no, for now that she was the queen, she was queen. She no longer wished her own subjects to be discontented, but she very much wanted the citizens of all the neighboring countries to rebel. For then, though she, when they're all in confusion, for them, thought she, when they're all in confusion, I will make old Courtesy send great armies among them, and I will subject them all to my rule, and my son shall be king of half the world. Amen. And then Prince Perio walked in. Well, he went straight up to where Aunt Gamboy was standing, speaking, and took hold of her. And he bounced her up and down on the floor, just as though he were driving piles, or hammering a nail into his shoe with a poker, or knocking in stumps with a cricket bat. He did that until he had fairly shaken the breath out of her. And then he did that again. And then he took her under his arm like a bolster and marched plonk out of the room with her. And when he had gone for 2 or 3 minutes, those astonished amalgamated princesses shut their mouths again, but not before. He walked straight into the office of the head gaoler. He put Queen Gamboy down on the table, and he said to the head gaoler, "Here." And then he went out of the office and up to King Courtesy's private study, knocked on the door, and went in. The king was drinking coffee and staring at the cat. The prince said, "Good morning, sire. Your daughter is being married tomorrow morning at 10. But the king only stared at him in a silly way. So he went to the cupboard, took out the silver trumpet, and came downstairs with it. And then he called the castle servants about him and bade them make all preparations for a magnificent wedding. Then he returned to Princess Lily. "But dear," said she, when he told her what he had done, how am I to marry you tomorrow when I have no wedding dress?" With that, he sounded a little bell, and in came the first maid in waiting, who stood there and listened while he told her what to do. At last, the next morning came, and with it the time for their wedding. There was Princess Lily in the beautiful wide white dress, which her mother, the Queen Violet, had worn on her own wedding day. For such were the orders of Pirio. Such were the orders Pirio had given to the maid-in-waiting. And there was Prince Pirio himself in a shining suit of bright silver mail, with a silver casque on his head and a nodding gray plume to it. Just before the wedding, 4 stately bearers were sent with a royal litter to the king's chamber to carry him down. And at first, when he came, he saw nobody, and peering with his white face from the curtained litter, seemed not to know where he was. But when he saw Princess Lily standing in her mother's dress, "My daughter," he said, and stepped down from the litter. At the same time, by the prince's orders, Queen Gamboy was released from gaol and given leave to attend the wedding. Nor did she stand humbly at the back among the onlookers, as might have been expected, but came boldly forward and stood with sullen, scowling face beside her niece. Some of the castle servants, eager to please their new master, started forward to hail her away from there. But Lily stopped them with a wave of her hand and bid them let her go. Now when the wedding was over and they came out of the church into the sunlight, Prince Pirio stepped forward and, taking the silver trumpet from his baldric, placed it to his lips. And the sound that came from the mouth of the trumpet was root-ti-toot-ti-toot-ti-toot-ti-toot-ti-toot, toot-toot-ti-toot-ti-toot-ti-toot, root-ti-too, root-ti-too, root-ti-too. Whereupon the procession stood very still, listening, and waiting for the noise to die away. But just as silence fell, and all were about to move forward again, the prince raised the trumpet to his lips a second time, and blew. Root-ti-toot-ti-toot-ti-toot-ti-toot, toot-toot-ti-toot-ti-toot-ti-toot, root-ti-too, root-ti-too, root-ti-too. And then a third time, and a fourth he blew, and again and again and again, till the air rang to the sweet silver din, and all the world seemed rocking about him like a steeple. Then it was that all eyes were turned upon the queen, and men saw what they would hardly believe afterwards that they had beheld. For again the queer change came over her face. Again the corners of her mouth began to turn up. The wrinkles to leave her forehead, and her eyes to lose their look of cunning. And still the trumpet rang on, till the air about their ears felt as solid as water, and shook as tempestuously. Her features went on changing and sliding into one another, like clouds over the sky, moving and clearing until there beside her husband, white-robed and laughing in the sunlight, stood none other than Queen Violet herself. "Where is the silver trumpet?" she cried at once as she awoke, and looking anxiously around her. "Where is the silver trumpet?" "Here, your Majesty," said Prince Perio, walking up and handing it to her with a low reverence. She took it and gave it to King Courtesy. "Guard it," she said. "Guard it in the future, even at the cost of your life." Whereat the stooping king straightened his old back as by a miracle. Now the vague, meandering look went out of his clear eyes, and taking the silver trumpet from Violet's hands, he kissed her. "Most gracious lady," he said, "most gracious lady," and broke down and wept, declaring that they would guard it together. And so they must have done, for it was never again lost from Mountney Castle. And some say that deep down in her grave, other features upon another face had been changing too, and sliding. That to this day a body, which is Anne Gamboy's, lies buried in that churchyard. But no man can point to her grave, and therefore many do not believe it. For the tombstone that had VR engraved upon it, now that Violet was alive, was gradually let fall into ruin. And soon men began to say that there never had been a grave in that spot. And in less than 30 years, they were saying that there never had been anybody called Anne Gamboy at all. But others pointed to the things she had done, to the amalgamated princesses, for instance. Why else would they be amalgamated? And they would also point to the high stock-like tower, crumbling now and disused, where Princess Lily had spent so many years of her life. Why should she have hidden herself away up there, they would ask, if Anne Gamboy had not fastened her claws into her heart? And again, why, they would say, should old King Courtesy have all those white hairs, and Queen Violet none, if Anne Gamboy had not let him such a dance above the earth, while Violet was sleeping quietly beneath it. So the two parties would argue with one another and never agree. And as time went on, it became harder and harder to decide which party was right. And it will go on getting harder still, I expect, unless this very story should travel as far as Mountney. For then, of course, everybody will know that there certainly was an Anne Gamboy, very much so. Everybody, that is, except those who will swear it is a forgery. But that is really looking too far ahead. Now, as soon as Prince Perio saw that King Courtesy and Queen Violet had finished embracing one another, he went up to King Courtesy, who stood bareheaded in the sunlight, trembling with amazement and joy, and handed him his sword. And he asked pardon courteously for the way in which he had taken upon himself to order the king's servants about that day and the last, hoping that the king would forgive him. "You shall order them about as you please," said the king, "for from this day forth you are the king of Mountney, and Lily, my daughter, is queen." Whereat there was a great shout, and again the silver trumpet rang through the air, while the old king and his newfound wife took both hands, threw their hands back, and danced around each other, singing, "And Lily, my daughter, is queen. Tra-la-la, and Lily, my daughter, is queen." Up the hill came the citizens, tramp, 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 singing in a low, threatening tone. Here we are, to make Queen Gamboy sing solfa. But when they reached the church and had heard the news, they cast away their pitchforks and axes, and flung their caps in the air, saying, Long live King Perio and Queen Lily, and spread themselves over the grass plot outside the churchyard. Then from the other direction, a party of 7 were seen approaching with rapid steps. It was old Miss Thompson, bringing with her the 5 musicians in the pink coats and curly gray wigs and yellow stockings, for she had foreseen, witchery old lady that she was, that there would be rejoicing that day, and she had sent for them where they dwelt. But the 7th person was the little cook from the inn. Prince Piria recognized him as he drew near, and sprang forward to greet him and shake his hand for gratitude. But before he could reach him, somebody else sprang forward too, in front of him, crying out, Little fat podger! Little fat podger! It was courtesy. And now old white-haired Lord Tullywitch came forward, and kneeling before his king explained in a thin and quavering voice how he had disobeyed his orders, telling him that the little fat podger had died in Gale. Whereas in truth, he had recovered from his illness, but he, Lord Tullywitch, had not had the heart to put him to death. So he had sent him away into hiding at an inn some 3 miles away, where he and his friends sometimes met for dinner and fun. Your Majesty will remember, went on Lord Tullywitch humbly, that I told you the dwarf had passed quietly away. And so indeed he did, for he passed quietly away to the little inn under my protection. Of course, the old king forgave him at once and thanked him royally for knowing, like a good servant, when to disobey orders. But the little fat podger himself had not spoken yet, and everyone waited in silence now to hear what he would say. He would only look around, smiling and nodding to everyone, with tears in his eyes, saying nothing at all. Yet some of those who stood nearest to him, though they thought they heard him murmuring to himself, "All those years washing dishes, it's as wholesome as a shoulder of a mutton to a sick horse. To a sick horse, you know." And then suddenly one leg shot out, and he would have begun to dance. Only he was getting too old now, so he drew it back again. He drew it back in again, thoughtfully, and was heard murmuring to himself, and the side step, step, and the side step, step, and the side step, side step, side step. Anything jocund. You can imagine what rejoicings there were then, what reunions between Courtesy and Lily, between Violet and Little Fat Podger, between Violet and the citizens, between Violet and Lily, who had only been 2 days old when she last saw her. You can imagine what shouting and laughter there was in the sunshine that morning upon the green plat of grass. Nor was it very long before the fiddlers struck up, and King Perio himself called the first tune. And these dances were quiet enough for the little fat podger to join in. Yes, and even old Lord Tullywitch cut a caper or two, for all his white hairs. On and on they danced, citizens and courtiers, lords and ladies, kings and queens, till the sun had gone down in the west, and the sky over their heads was cool green and gold. And then they all gathered in a knot around the fiddlers and danced a very old country dance called Mr. Barney's Breeches. And that was the end.
That's a great last line.
Oh, yes, it is.
Like last 2 lines or so.
Yeah.
It's and then you think that Barfield must have had some memory, of his own life of a country dance where they were dancing Mr. Barney's Breeches. That's so funny.
I've never heard of that dance, but I mean to find what it is like sometime.
Yeah, I've never heard of. I wonder if he made it up.
Oh, maybe somebody in England knows because
Yeah.
it really comes from that
Or you
countryside.
could ask his grandson.
Yeah, yeah. Owen maybe Owen knows.
Yeah, he probably does.
Okay, so one question. Do you think Gamboy ever existed?
Oh, hmm. I will, if she didn't, I don't know how Lily got so twisted. There's nothing to explain that. Um, huh.
I know there's that kind of that interesting idea that, somehow like evil exists in the world and somehow it somehow plays a role in the process of our redemption. And it's kind of a weird idea that
Yeah.
she somehow brought them to consciousness,
Yeah.
her existence.
Gamboy, you mean?
Yeah, but she was almost like a psychic energy. Like, did she really exist as a person? I
Yeah.
guess question, but clearly a lot of times our faults and the kind of parts of ourselves that seem to work against us sometimes push us towards a new consciousness. Like sometimes our enemies or people who hate us can sometimes push us in a different direction in life that we wouldn't have gone in otherwise. Because otherwise we would just be really comfortable little hobbits in our holes, but it's sometimes it's that adversity it's that part that doesn't work that makes us uncomfortable that really gets us out to make changes and go on adventures.
Yeah, that's really good talk.
That's really appropriate. In that line of Solzhenitsyn's about the line between good and evil goes through every human heart. It's not them and us, it's in us. So that that goes along with the idea of the self having both good and evil and wrestling with it. And in this case, the good overcame the evil with inspiration from beyond the trumpet and a sound that it's not just materialism or instruction or didactic. It was something you can't even put words to, the music. But
Yeah. It was really impressive the first time I read how the two sisters exchanged with the sound of the trumpet.
mhm.
Gamboy started changing back into Violet, and apparently Gamboy and Violet changed places in the grave somehow. If Gamboy ever existed, because some people say there wasn't even a grave that, 30 years later said there wasn't a grave there.
Yeah.
But one thought I had, and I'm not sure that's what Barfield meant at all, but it's just an idea. When I read about him or it's probably his mother that had such an interesting personality, kind of contradictory personality. It's either his mother or his aunt. I forgot now. But when I read it, I had this theory or assumption uh, that one person, like Jill said, one person can have two sides, really. Often, that happens often. That when the silver trumpet is there, it brings out the best in me, and it really makes me who I am. But when the silver trumpet is lost, I turn into somebody else. And I may look the same, except for the wrinkles, except, of course, if I've lost old joy in life, I will look sort of the same, but then different in many ways. And I will go then and do all kinds of things in my unconsciousness as if I am a totally different person. And I will like create fear in others. I will create those stalk-like towers for other people. I will, cause rebellion, incite rebellion or whatever, as if I'm somebody else until I hear that sound again. And then if the silver trumpet sounds long enough, uh, and it is that magical sound, there will be this exchange, but sooner or later. Something, of course, must die, but there's this exchange that happens. And then I'm looking like at what I've done, and I say, my goodness, was it me doing that? You know what I'm saying? It may not be as exaggerated or grotesque like in the movie, but sometimes I look back and say, how could I have done that? Was it even was it myself when I did that or thought that or whatever? As if it was another person who did it, in a certain sense. And so it's just one idea, but the reason I think that's what Barfield could, may have meant here is because later when I read his other book, Saving the Appearances, he kind of literally unpacks this little book, even though this is like a myth, like a fairy tale. But in that treatise of his, which he believes is like his central thing that he wrote, he kind of unfolds it and shows that we're actually living this reality out in our daily life. Like there's a tension and a struggle between an appearance and the substance of a thing.
Mm.
And then it kind of came together to me. For example, uh, like if there's a person in front of me, and I mistake the appearance of that person for who they are, and I start kind of worshiping that person, just like King Courtesy started kind of worshiping the appearance, not the substance. Uh, what happens then is that the appearance becomes an idol, and the substance is lost. And Barfield in the book in the Saving Appearances, Barfield kind of mentions that the Hebrew word for an idol means empty. Empty. So it's like a husk with no substance. And that's what Gamboy was, like a husk with no substance.
Mm.
And he's trying to say that happens every time we are deceived by appearances. It appears real, so we kind of take it for real. We don't really see that it's empty, whatever it is. And then we're deceived. And it's an elaborate argument, but what happens when for instance, like I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine who's a scientist, back from Russia, uh, and we were talking about something, and we were at this beautiful like nature place, and there was a river, and I was commenting at some, I was kind of being a little poetic that day, so I was pointing at some interesting, like the fog over the river and this and that, and he was telling me that this is H2O, this is H2O with a few other things. And he was like, after about 30 minutes of him talking, I said to him, okay, you said the truth. You told me the truth. It's true that it's H2O. It's true that it's flow, it's really cutting its way into this shore because of this current or whatever, it's all true. But you know what you've just done? You've disenchanted the river. You know, you've told me the truth, but you've told the truth in such a way that it disenchants the river. Well, he didn't get it back then, but man, I'm not sure what he believes now. But uh, that's it was kind of kind of illustrates a good illustration of what happens when we just look at a river or look at a tree or a flower and see what meets the eye and take for granted that this is it. There's nothing more to it. It's not a representation of something invisible that's beyond this world, but it is what it is. So if the river is what it is, then I'm gonna break it down and study it and see what's there, and I believe that that's what it is. And Barfield says, "This moment I created an idol." That's when Gamboy appears in the world.
Mhm.
That's where she comes from. And she disappears the moment my gaze pierces through the husk at the sound of the trumpet, and I recover what is beyond. Then things kind of fall into place, and I understand that I live. Everything is a symbol. Everything is. We live in a symbolic world, and then kind of they and then they swap places. You know, the two sisters swap places. So it's just a theory. I have no kind of no proof of that's what he thought, but it really for me it makes a lot of sense after reading this Saving the Appearances.
Yeah, that made perfect sense to me, what you just said. Um, I think he probably Barfield, along with the Inklings, spent their adult lives trying to re-enchant the world without being silly about it. You know, they because they were so brilliant, such great scholars that they'd come along in the, from the Enlightenment, and then they saw what it was leading to in terms of dehumanization. And then they turned to a non-materialistic, you know, promptings to explain the wholeness of life, so that, you bring together the dark woman there and the light woman, and you'll get another human being by that kind of I don't think that he would cast out the bad, but he would integrate it with a higher meaning than just greed or power.
And of course, as Jill said, even Barfield himself pointed out that consciousness is undergoing an evolution, even though sometimes it feels like it's a devolution. But actually, this part of us, unconscious part of us, exists for a purpose, and brings us to the point where we can start hearing the silver trumpet again. And so that's really kind of a deep realization that none of it is in vain.
Well, I think that's what you're doing with your Substack, and we are all readers of that, and it feels real, because you're bringing out real images that are inspiring in your conclusions about things in the essays, and it's in that vein. So, I think nobody on this Zoom is actually in danger terribly of being too left brain or too, regimented and tight. But we don't all have environments where we feel that companionship of thought, and appreciation for these writers. But there's a small number of people, I think, especially online. Like, I saw this great podcast about Barfield with Mark Vernon. Have you ever
Yeah,
seen
I
that?
know Mark. I've been at one of his events. Yeah.
Really uh odd guy, but he's so clear. And this was one he did on Barfield's idea of the imagination, but he Mark gives a whole history of the world, and up to our time in this capsule that was so amazing. I thought it
Yeah.
was a great interview.
I think that's the one I've been to. Was it online?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
on.
Yeah, online.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's crazy. Amazing.
And ties him into William Blake, and the four visions for Blake had the vision of four dimensions of humanity, and he brings Barfield into that. I mean, there was so much interesting thought um in that part of England, and the late 18th and early um non-19th century.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting, what you said was how when we stop listening to the trumpet music, that, then we kind of go into this unconscious mode. And and there's so many symbols of the unconscious, like this, we're casting spells on people. Like you said, we're building towers, we're creating narratives of fear, and everyone around us starts to like close off. And I mean, those are such really powerful symbols, and I think those are important symbols to guide us too when we fall into those kind of spells and traps.
Mm.
Okay, we need to go back. um we're losing energy, we're unconscious, life has lost all its meaning. And then we can kind of work our way out of those spells and listen to the trumpet music that calls each one of us. I'm probably somewhat different for everybody, what that music is.
It's interesting that at the end it says he blew again and then again and then again and then again until blah blah blah. So basically he didn't stop. I mean and it just gives me this whole idea that good conversations like the one we're having now shouldn't end. I just talked to another person just the other day, and this person said, when I have certain conversations around meaning, I come alive. And when I stop, I kind of, it's just
Yeah.
like and yeah, and it's just the whole thing that the world was created through the word, and then the word is everywhere, whether we can hear it with ears or not, it's just there.
Yeah.
So it's either the good spell, by the way, gospel, I've looked it up. It used to mean good spell, literally, or bad spell, whichever, whichever, And so yeah.
Um, Speaking of trumpets, I saw my husband and I watched on the line. We hadn't seen this movie in 30 years, Chinatown. So Chinatown, if did everybody see that long ago?
No, I did.
Oh my God. Well, I'll just tell you briefly the moment with the trumpet. The it's a very powerful movie, and there's a love story between uh the detective and sort of the victim. And since you haven't seen it, you'll forget that I'm going to tell you this. At the end, she's killed in Chinatown, and it's a terrible twist in the story. But then, as the cameras are fading off of this dark scene, this trumpet comes on, and it had an amazing effect on me. It like pulled together both sides of the story, the love and the sorrow. And for days I kept pulling it up on the internet, the love song on the trumpet at the end of Chinatown. So I
Wow.
recommend it to anyone. But
Okay.
it's so heavy and tragic, but that can be very powerful, after you've seen something that's so complicated in the human drama, and you're not sure, is this a terrible ending? Is it, and then you get this life affirming sound that just ties it in and makes sense of everything. So anyway, I had that song in my mind because that was not long ago, but it's so powerful.
Okay. Chinatown. Okay.
Yeah, it's a great movie too. So probably watch the movie,
Mm.
and it's Jill, have you not seen Chinatown?
No, mm-mm.
Oh my God. It was when I was young, it was such a huge hit. I think it got the Academy Award, but it's a takeoff on 1930s with Jack Nicholson and Faye Dunaway. And it takes off on those detective stories, from the 40s film noir, but it's modern and modernly made, but it's in that period. So for the trumpet music, it's worth watching but also for everything else.
Wow. Well, any th final thoughts? The impressions and short.
Well, are you going to do another book later after
Yeah.
summer?
Yeah. After some, I was thinking about reading several chapters of the Silmarillion together because I seem to be
Oh,
going back to that. And there's so much packed in those. I don't think we want to do the whole thing because it's too long. But the first three chapters, maybe four chapters about how everything started. And and by the way, another uh, thought at the end of this book is interesting how Tolkien was able to integrate the appearance and the substance uh, in his fantasy world. Because, for example, I'm still thinking about what my friend said about the river like H2O and all these beautiful things, which are correct. They're right. I'm not saying that science was wrong in identifying those things. But what Tolkien was able to do, I think, is that he created this civilization of the elves, for instance, like Rivendell and Lothlorien, right? And they have all those modern technologies there, and they're even like more advanced than even what the orcs. I don't know where they got their technology, but I don't know. So, but in some ways, they're utilizing the left brain, right? They're utilizing, like, how do they make those light boats or those magical cloaks or their knives that glow in when the enemy comes close. So that they must have some knowledge and some deep understanding of how things work, but they don't worship it. Just like Ian McGilchrist says often that if you do not worship this scientific part of the brain, this is it
Mhm.
left side, left brain, right? If you
Mhm.
don't worship it, it's going to be an emissary, the servant of the right, because right brain is holistic. It shows the whole, but it needs the help of this other brain, the left brain, in order to be able to bring this uh, basically all those beautiful things that the elves had, and they blessed everybody with those. And people called them magic, right? Elvish magic, but even the elf in the Lord of the Rings, he explains it's not magic. We just put the love of everything we love into everything we do. So all those precious stones and all the metals that they work and the forges that they use and all these things, they seem to have this integrated brain, so to say, integrated consciousness of the two. And that's kind of yeah, I don't see it happening in our world on the large scale, but in certain parts, I see people awakening more and more to that it's not about opposing the two. It's about integrating somehow, with the right hierarchy. It's a kind of a raw thought in my mind, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say.
Oh, I understand what you mean. Yeah, and I think it's actually I think there's a way to deal with AI that way
Yeah,
that
maybe.
that as Martin Shaw said, there's demons in the machine, but there is also angels, and there's a way to use it um, as a tool to advance expression of individual creators who are on the internet, to cut out a lot of middle pieces that can drag a project down or, cost too much. There, I think if we focus on how an artist can use it rather than completely 100%, like Paul Kingsnorth's, so negative on the machine, but I'm thinking that there's a way for some integration that's positive. I don't know exactly what it is, but it just is an instinct I've been having lately. Um,
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. I still have my questions, but
yeah, oh
I'm
no,
listening. Yeah.
I think everyone's afraid because that they're most afraid that it will take over. It'll think for quote itself and won't have a human hand guiding it in any way. We won't have any control over it. So that's the nightmare, I think. And I guess all these writers anticipated that could happen, like with that hideous strength from Lewis, and you know that some mega mind would run humans. uh, without human, volition or determination. So,
Yeah, but I do think that's a big human struggle, just like psychologically and in politics and all over the place. Like, how do we integrate new knowledge without like idolizing it? And how do we integrate ourselves so that we're not idolizing certain parts over other parts? And so that struggle for integration, I think, is really like what this book in a lot of ways, it's giving us symbols to help us
mm,
to kind of guide us towards that kind of inner integration that we're looking for. And hopefully it sounds like the Tolkien books are all about that too. Because we're all kind of aiming for a more of a consciousness that can understand creativity and transcendence, and we're all moving in that direction. And so that's why I love like this book club and books like this too, because I think this is all helping us do that. So thank you, Eugene, for
Well,
yeah.
thank you for participating. It's been such a pleasure. Amazing.
So you think you'll probably do it again in September?
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
Okay.
If there are enough people wanting to do it, I'm all for it. Actually, my wife and I, we hosted a book club in our apartment back in Russia, and that was, such things really make you. You know, it's you think you do those things, but then in hindsight, you realize it's the thing that made you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I
It's
know what you
like,
mean. Yeah.
and for me, it's part of sounding the trumpet.
Yeah.
Because that's good conversation must go on.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Joellen, do you have any closing thoughts for us?
Mm. No, this was just a lot of fun. I enjoyed reading the book with you guys.
Thank you for joining. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, yeah, and I like ending conversations with a feeling that I could go on for another 10 hours easily. So that I have this feeling now I could go on, but I don't want to get
Pick-
started.
We can pick up where we left off 3 months from now,
Yeah.
or 2.5.
Yeah. Okay, I'll closer to September, I'll just shoot out an email to everybody and we'll see. We'll take it from there. And thank
Fantastic.
you. Yeah, God bless your
Yay.
summer.
thank
Have a
you.
good
God
one,
bless
Happy
you
summer.
guys.
everybody.
Yeah.
Yes. Have a good day.
Bye.
You
Bye-bye.
too.
Bye.
Bye.